Why did they cut her harness? That question would echo for years through the corridors of Fort Bragg, whispered between soldiers who swore they'd seen everything. But that night, 8,000 feet over the frozen ridges of the Hindu Kush, there were no witnesses. Just the Black Hawk, the thin air, and a woman who would refuse to die. The night was too quiet. That was Nora King's first thought. Even with the steady chop of rotor blades, even with the hum of instruments and the muffled chatter on comms, the quiet had weight, the kind that presses on the chest before something breaks. She'd been on dozens of flights like this, routine insertions, night raids, fast rope exfiltrations, but this felt different. The air was colder, the silence sharper, and the men around her too still. 5 Delta operators, men with eyes like gun barrels, faces carved out of old battles. They said nothing, didn't joke, didn't fidget, just waited. For what, she wasn't sure. Nora checked her rifle for the 5th time. It didn't need checking. She did it to stay busy. Old habit, the ritual of competence. When you've seen people die for small mistakes, you start double-checking everything, the bolt, the safety, the optics, as if control over one thing could anchor you against the chaos. She caught her reflection in the small side window. Brown eyes steady, expression unreadable, dark hair cropped short beneath her helmet. Nothing about her looked extraordinary, and yet she was one of the few women to ever earn a place in the 75th Ranger Regiment. 5 years in, 17 operations across 3 countries. Her file was sealed, redacted even from officers who tried to request it. And she liked it that way. The mission had begun hours earlier at Forward Operating Base Chapman, a briefing that should have been routine. But she'd felt the tension the second she walked in. Major Harrison had been standing near the map display, talking to the Delta team. The moment Nora entered, conversation stopped. Eyes shifted. Not the usual kind of stare, not the female ranger curiosity she'd long grown immune to, but something colder. Measured, calculating. "King," Harrison said, voice clipped, "you're sitting this one out." The words didn't make sense. She'd been on every Copper Valley op for the past year. She knew those mountains better than anyone, their caves, passes, weather patterns. Her recon work had saved entire squads from walking into ambushes. "Sir," she asked, though she already felt the answer settle in her gut. "Orders from higher. The Deltas are taking point tonight. You're there for terrain familiarization only, no ground ops." He gestured toward the 5 men in their chairs. They looked up just long enough to meet her gaze, then went back to their gear. Uninterested, dismissive. Nora's jaw tightened. "Understood, sir." But something cold uncoiled in her stomach. The Delta leader was Master Sergeant Cole Rohr. They called him Hammer. Big, scarred, the kind of man who looked like he'd been built, not born. He gave her a thin, unreadable smile. "Just along for the ride, huh?" he'd said, half amusement, half challenge. She didn't answer. Some men only respected silence. After the briefing, her spotter, Specialist Danny Kim, found her at the armory. He'd been with her for 2 years, the kind of soldier who noticed what others missed. "This stinks," he muttered, loading magazines. "You lead half the missions in the Coronal, now you're back up." She didn't look up. "Orders are orders." "Yeah, and orders have fingerprints. You sure about this, Nora?" She met his eyes for a second. "No, but I'll handle it." He sighed. "Then I'll be on standby, Channel 6 encrypted." That was his way of saying, "I've got you, if things go sideways." She didn't thank him. In this world, gratitude came after survival. 2,300 hours. The Black Hawk lifted off from Chapman under a moonless sky. Mountains below were jagged teeth against the black, the kind of terrain that could eat a team alive. Nora sat near the door, supposedly to observe terrain features, but in truth, she wanted the vantage. The gunner beside her nodded once, professional courtesy, nothing more. 20 minutes into flight, the pilot's voice came over comms. Approaching phase line Alpha, 3 mics to target. That was when Roar stood up. The movement was casual, a man stretching his legs, but Nora's instincts screamed. He didn't need to say a word. She saw it in the subtle glance he gave his men, in the shift of shoulders, in the hand that drifted toward his thigh rig. Her hand went to her sidearm, slow and steady. Roar's voice came through her headset, calm despite the rotor noise. "You know what your problem is, King." "Enlighten me," she said, eyes on him. "You're too good." That got the others' attention. The air seemed to compress. Roar took a step closer, eyes gleaming in the green tint of night vision. "Command's noticed. Locals too. You've made a name out here, ghost of the coronel, the woman who walks through ambushes like weather. That kind of fame is bad for business." "Whose business?" she asked, though the answer was already forming. "The kind that pays better than Uncle Sam." The words were almost gentle, like he was explaining a math problem. She didn't flinch. "Rashidi," she said flatly, "you're working with him." Roar smiled, a scar twisting his cheek. "Smart girl, he's more than a bomb maker, you know. He moves product, opium, weapons, information. And he pays handsomely to anyone who removes obstacles." "Obstacles like me." 50,000 each, he said, voice low, "plus future considerations. Nothing personal." He drew his knife, not as a threat, as an inevitability. The other operators moved in. One on her left, one behind. They boxed her in with professional precision. She had seconds, maybe less. Options flickered through her head like snapshots: fight, draw, dive for the open door. At this altitude, the wind alone could tear her out if she wasn't careful. She needed time, but time was a currency she no longer had. Roar crouched, the knife blade catching green reflections. "Don't make this hard, Ranger. Harness fails all the time in these mountains. Tragic accident, full honors, you'll even get a flag." He sliced through her straps. "Roar," she started, but hands were already grabbing her vest, lifting. "Should have stayed home," he said. And then she was gone. The night swallowed her whole. The world became wind and gravity. No sound but the scream of air past her ears, the thump of her heart. 8,000 feet, no parachute, no chance. Except there's always a chance, if you know how to think through pain. Training kicked in before panic could. She spread her arms and legs, stable arch position. She'd done this in training jumps before, but never without a chute. Control your body, control your fall. The mountain rushed up to meet her like a fist. 40 seconds to impact. Nora scanned the dark below through her night vision goggles. The valley unfolded like a living map. Ridges, ravines, flashes of moonlit water. There the Coronel River, wide, fast, full of snowmelt. Not safe, just less fatal than stone. She angled her body toward it. Physics became prayer. Every breath, every twitch, a calculation. 30 seconds. The cold bit her cheeks through the wind. She remembered Ranger School, water survival training, Sergeant Martinez shouting over the roar of a pool. "It's not about toughness, it's about physics. Don't hit the water, enter it." 20 seconds. Her body aligned to a 45 degrees entry angle. Toes pointed, hands crossed over her rifle to protect it and her chest. Legs locked but not rigid. One wrong angle, and she'd snap her spine on impact. 10 seconds. The river was a silver vein now, rushing up to meet her. 5. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs. 1. Impact. The world exploded. It wasn't like hitting water. It was like being punched by God. Her body screamed in every language nerves could speak. Her left shoulder tore loose with a pop she didn't hear. Pain became white noise. Her mind shut down everything except movement. She sank. The darkness was absolute, cold so deep it burned. Her lungs seized, her helmet cracked against stone. The current grabbed her, spinning her like a rag doll. Then instinct, that stubborn ranger instinct, took over. Kick up, don't think, move. She pushed off the riverbed, legs barely responding. Her vest dragged like an anchor, gear soaked and heavy. Then air, a gasp that ripped through her throat like fire. She coughed water, blood, adrenaline. The current slammed her into a boulder, ribs cracked, maybe broken, but it shoved her toward the shallows. She crawled onto a gravel bar, shivering violently, lungs rasping. Every breath tasted like iron. Alive. Somehow impossibly alive. Above, she could still hear the Black Hawk. Circling once, then fatting away. They'd check for a body. They'd find none. They'd assume the mountains buried her. Good. Let them. It took 3 tries to stand. Each time her vision grayed out, knees shaking, shoulders screaming, but she got up. The temperature was dropping fast. Hypothermia would kill her if she stopped moving. She staggered into the tree line, found a hollow under a cluster of boulders, and dropped. Hands trembling, she pulled out her emergency kit. Waterproofed, like every smart ranger's was. Inside, fire starter, thermal blanket, morphine injector. She eyed the morphine but shoved it back. Pain meant she was still conscious. She couldn't afford fog. Instead, she bit down on her rifle sling and rammed her shoulder back into its socket. The sound was wet, obscene. A scream clawed up her throat, but she swallowed it. No noise, not yet. She wrapped her ribs tight with her sling, just enough to keep her lung from collapsing. Her radio was dead, shattered, waterlogged. GPS beacon intact but useless. Activating it would light her up like a beacon for Roar's team. So she waited. Under the thin blanket in the dark, breathing through pain. Planning. They thought they'd erased her. They'd just rewritten her mission. When dawn broke, she'd start the hunt. Not for survival. For truth. The men who threw her out of that helicopter didn't realize what they'd created. A ranger with nothing left to lose. And in the mountains, that was more dangerous than any enemy. How do you hunt the men who believe you're dead? You start by remembering who you are and forgetting who you were. Dawn crept over the mountains like a reluctant promise. Light spilled down from jagged ridges, cold and thin, touching the river that had almost claimed her. Nora King watched it from the shadows of her makeshift shelter, teeth chattering beneath the metallic-sounding crinkle of her emergency blanket. Her body was a ledger of pain, ribs tight-bound, shoulders swollen, knee barely holding weight. Every breath stabbed, every movement cost something. But the numbers still added up to one fact that mattered. She was breathing. She'd seen soldiers die for less. A misplaced step, a bad call, a single moment of doubt. But doubt was a luxury. The world had taken everything else. She wasn't giving it that too. Through her cracked binoculars, she spotted the Black Hawk circling again, a dark shape cutting lazy loops over the valley. They were looking for a body. Not her. Just proof she was gone. From her perch under the rock shelf, she watched them hover, land and fan out along the riverbank. 5 shadows in the distance, the Delta team. They moved with professional precision, one covering, one scanning, the rest methodically checking along the shore. She recognized the pattern. She used it herself to track insurgents. The irony wasn't lost on her. Roar was there, unmistakable even at 800 meters, that heavy, confident walk. He carried himself like gravity answered to him. He'd be barking orders right now, telling his men to check downstream to confirm the accident. They wouldn't find what they were looking for. The current had carried her far enough that only luck or guilt could bring them close. Nora adjusted her rifle, or what was left of it. The scope was intact, the barrel true. The rest bore the scars of impact in water. But it would fire, once, maybe twice, before the recoil tore through her damaged shoulder. She lined up her sight on Roar's team. They were careful, but not careful enough. They believed the narrative they'd written. The one where she died screaming in the dark. Her finger hovered over the trigger, heartbeat steady. She could end one of them now. End Roar. But that would be easy, too easy. A clean shot solves nothing when the infection runs deep. So instead, she shifted her aim, found the radio antenna on Roar's pack and breathed. In. Out. Pause. Squeeze. The rifle cracked, a single thunderclap rolling through the valley. The antenna erupted in sparks and plastic. Instant chaos. 5 men dropped flat, scanning the ridgelines. For 10 long seconds, the world held its breath. Then came Roar's voice, echoing faintly across the distance, carried by mountain acoustics. "King, I know that's you." She didn't reply. Just let the silence answer for her. "Listen," he shouted again, tone shifting from command to negotiation. "It was just business. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Nora exhaled softly, almost smiling. Business. That's what they called betrayal when they needed to sleep at night. She slipped from her position, teeth gritted against the pain, and moved downslope. Never fire twice from the same spot. That was Rule 1. She taught it. Now she was living it. Her knee buckled once, a flash of blackness at the edges of her vision, but she caught herself, breathing through the pain until the world steadied again. She had time before they'd triangulate the shot. Time to disappear. As she moved, her thoughts went to Kim, her spotter, her only friend in country. He'd wake up soon, check the mission board, see that her team hadn't returned yet. And he'd know. Danny always knew when something didn't add up. She just needed to stay alive long enough for him to start asking questions. By midday, she'd climbed into higher ground, a narrow overhang that offered concealment and a clear line of sight down the valley. The pain had turned dull, rhythmic, like a second heartbeat. She welcomed it. Pain meant she was still in the fight. Below, Roar's team regrouped near the river. She watched through her scope as they argued, small gestures, clipped words. Even from distance, she could read body language like a transcript. Briggs was nervous. Cooper angry. Roar furious but controlled, the kind of man who compartmentalized rage until it became something colder. They'd realize soon enough what the shot meant. Not a kill, a message. I'm alive, I'm watching, and I'm not done. That was the problem with men like Roar. They underestimated quiet people. They mistook silence for submission. But silence was just strategy, the breath before recoil. She saw them move out again, fanning into the tree line. Good tactics, poor intuition. They were hunting her like she was a wounded animal. But she wasn't the one bleeding yet. By afternoon, clouds rolled in, the kind that promised snow. Visibility dropped. Temperature followed. Perfect. Nora used the change like camouflage, working her way along the ridges, using goat trails the smugglers favored. Every step was calculated, measured against her pain and the distance to her next objective. She had a goal now. Reach the old recon cache she'd buried 3 nights ago during her last long-range patrol. 2 kilometers north, past the valley mouth, hidden under an abandoned shepherd's hut. Inside was salvation, spare ammo, a med kit, and most important, a satellite phone. But to get there, she had to pass the same ridgelines the Delta team now occupied. Fine. Let them think they were chasing her. Let them think she was running. She'd lead them exactly where she wanted them. A light snow began to fall, soft, silent. It covered her tracks as fast as she made them. Nature was an accomplice tonight. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs screamed, her knee felt like glass grinding in the joint. But she kept moving. Rangers move or die. And she'd already done enough dying for one mission. By dusk, she reached a narrow trail that wound along a cliff face, barely a meter wide, nothing between her and 100-meter drop but prayer and balance. She went slow, hugging the rock wall, boots finding grip in cracks invisible to the eye. Halfway across, she heard them. Voices. Below. The Delta team, following the river bend. Close enough that she could hear Roar's tone again, still calm, still commanding, but with a thin layer of strain. They hadn't found a body. They'd found a ghost instead. Nora waited until they passed, then slipped further along the trail, leaving something behind, a simple trap. A deadfall snare made from paracord and a loosened branch. Primitive, effective. When the last man, Cooper, took a step off the main path to check a footprint, the trap triggered. The branch swung down, missing his head by inches, but the shock made him stumble backward and roll down the slope. She heard the snap of bone, the curse that followed. One man down. Not dead, but out of the fight. 4 left. And the math was shifting. Night came fast in the Hindu Kush. By 2100 hours, darkness owned the valley again. The temperature dropped below freezing. Nora huddled beneath a ledge, watching their campfire flicker far below. They were smart defensive position, overlapping arcs, good elevation. But not smart enough. She used the time to check her rifle, her gear, her body. Every part of her was either bleeding, broken, or bruised, but none of it mattered. Pain was just information. You acknowledge it, categorize it, move past it. She ate an energy bar from her pocket, half frozen but edible, then forced herself to drink water. Dehydration kills faster than bullets in this climate. The fire below dimmed. One by one, their shadows settled into sleep. Except for the guards, Briggs and Matthews, posted north and south. Roar trusted them to stay alert. She smiled faintly. Trust was another word for blind spot. She waited until 300, the dead hour, when even nightmares grow tired. Then she moved. It took her an hour to crawl within 50 meters of their perimeter. Every movement deliberate, every breath slow. The snow-muffled sound, masking her approach. She passed close enough to Briggs to see the vapor from his breath. He was cold, bored, half awake, a man whose instincts were fatting under fatigue. Nora picked up a small stone, rolled it in her fingers, and tossed it into the darkness to his right. It hit a branch, snapping just loud enough. He turned, weapon raised. In that heartbeat, she slid past him, ghosting into the camp. Inside, the scene was almost peaceful. 4 men asleep, weapons close, fire dying to embers. Roar's breathing was steady, not the restless kind of guilt, but the deep rhythm of a man certain of control. She stood there for 3 seconds, every instinct telling her to end it. A knife through the throat, quick, quiet. Justice. But not truth. Killing him now would bury the proof with him. She needed the world to see what they'd done. Her eyes found the small satellite phone beside his pack, charging from a portable battery. She couldn't take it, too obvious. But she could use it. She typed fast, fingers stiff but precise, sending a coded message through a secure channel. Coordinates, status. And one line Danny Kim would recognize instantly. They think I'm dead, don't let them be right. She left the phone where it was, then reached into her pocket, pulling out the small digital recorder that had survived her fall. The last 24 hours were there, their confession, the shot, everything. She slid it under Roar's own pack. When the time came, he'd deliver his own evidence straight to command. As she turned to leave, Roar's eyes snapped open. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, hunter and prey switching roles again. His hand darted for his sidearm. Hers for her knife. Steel flashed. She drove the blade through his hand, pinning it to the frozen ground. His scream tore the night apart. She was gone before his men even sat up. "Find her," he roared, blood soaking his glove. "Find her now." But finding a ghost in mountains that belonged to her was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. By dawn, she put 2 kilometers between them. The horizon burned gold, the sky clean after the storm. Every step hurt, every breath was a victory. But when she crested the ridge and saw the outline of the old shepherd's hut, half buried, half collapsed, a flicker of relief broke through the exhaustion. Her cache was intact. Inside, she found the sealed crate. Ammo, medical kit, batteries, and the satellite phone. She sat on the floor, shaking fingers, dialing a number from memory. "Danny," she said when the line clicked open. There was a beat of silence, then his voice rough with sleep. "Nora, Jesus." "Record this call," she said, cutting him off, "and listen carefully." She told him everything. The setup, the fall, the betrayal. The confession she'd recorded. The location of Roar's camp. He didn't interrupt once. When she finished, the rotor thump of approaching helicopters echoed through the valley. 2 birds, maybe 3. "Rescue or execution," she muttered. "Nora, stay put," Kim ordered. "We're scrambling everyone. Major Harrison in the air." "Negative," she said, loading a flare into her launcher. "I'm finishing this." She stepped outside into the bright morning and fired the flare straight up, a red streak cutting across the sky. Her signal. Her challenge. "Here I am, come and get me." What happens when the truth starts falling faster than the lies? Sometimes it hits the ground harder than either side expects. The flare burned red against the cold blue sky, a defiant streak of fire that refused to fade. Nora stood beneath it, rifle slung low, shoulder bound tight, every nerve screaming but her stance steady. The sound of approaching rotors grew louder, 1 bird, then 2, then 3. The air filled with dust and thunder, whipping her hair, biting her skin. It was a sound she'd known her whole career, the sound of rescue or death, depending on who stepped off the ramp. Her heartbeat didn't spike. She'd already decided, whoever came first would find her waiting. She watched as the first Blackhawk broke from formation, banking low toward her ridge. The other veered south, toward Roar's last known position. The third, an Apache, hovered high, guns trained down, its rotors chopping the thin air like judgment. Through the haze, she saw faces inside the first helicopter. One in particular made her exhale for the first time in hours. Danny Kim. He was leaning forward by the door gunner, helmet off, headset on, scanning for her through the glass. When his eyes found her, a small figure standing in the open snow with a red flare burning in her hand, his expression shifted from disbelief to fury to something softer. Beside him, Major Harrison. His face was harder to read. The man had the look of someone carrying a dozen unspoken decisions, and now all of them were crashing into each other. The helicopter touched down roughly 30 meters from her position. Snow exploded outward in a halo of white. Nora shielded her face, waited until the rotors slowed enough to approach, and limped toward them. Kim jumped out before the skids had fully settled, sprinting across the snow. "Jesus Christ, Nora," he shouted over the rotor wash. She almost laughed, the absurdity of it. "You took your time." He stopped short, taking in the damage, the bandaged ribs, the sling, the blood crusted into her fatigues. "How are you even standing?" "Rangers don't quit," she said simply. Her voice was hoarse, raw but steady, "and we don't die easy." Behind him, Harrison climbed out of the Blackhawk, his uniform crisp even in the chaos. He looked her up and down, not disbelief, not relief, something heavier. "King," he said, "you were declared KIA 4 hours ago." "I noticed." He didn't smile. "You mind explaining how you survived an 8,000-foot fall without a chute?" She met his eyes. "Sir, with respect, I didn't have time to die politely." Harrison stared at her for a moment longer, then gestured toward the ridge behind them. "Delta Team's 2 clicks south. We're heading there next. I assume you have something I need to hear." Nora nodded, reaching into her vest pocket. She pulled out the small, mud-stained recorder. "It's all on here," she said. "Their confession, the deal with Rashidi, the hit." Harrison took it like it was a live grenade. For a second, the only sounds were the engines cooling and the distant echo of the second helicopter's rotors. Then his radio crackled. "Eagle 2, this is Eagle 1. A voice came through when distorted. "On site with Roar's unit. Situation unstable. Repeat unstable. Request immediate oversight." Harrison's eyes flicked toward the south ridge. "Mount up," he ordered. "We're finishing this." He turned to Nora. "You're not fit for field action. Stay here." She almost laughed. "Sir, if I can walk, I can fight." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Fine, but you stay on my 6." She loaded her rifle, wincing as her shoulder protested. "Copy that." The Blackhawks lifted again, banking toward the valley. Below, the snow fields and rock slopes blurred together, the river a dark thread cutting through the white. Nora sat near the open door, wind battering her face, eyes fixed on the horizon. Every second felt stretched, the world narrowing to the sound of rotors and her own heartbeat. When they crested the ridge, she saw it. Roar's position, a cluster of rocks beside a frozen stream. Smoke drifted from a dying fire. Figures moved below, 4 of them now. One was injured, hobbling on a makeshift crutch. The others, armed, alert, expecting trouble. The lead Blackhawk hovered 50 feet above the ground. Harrison grabbed the comm headset. "Eagle 1 to Roar, stand down and disarm. You are ordered to remain in position for debrief." Static, then Roar's voice, sharp, defensive. "Major, we've been compromised. Hostiles in the area. Request QRF extraction." Harrison's jaw tightened. "There are no hostiles, only the people you tried to kill." A pause, then Roar again, colder this time. "That's a hell of an accusation, sir." Nora could see him now through the open side of the chopper. Blood still wrapped his left hand. His face calm, unreadable, like a man rehearsing innocence. She'd seen that expression before, on insurgents after interrogation. Men who decided the lie was safer than the truth. Harrison motioned to the pilot. "Set us down." The moment the Blackhawk skids touched, the tension became electric. The Delta team stood in a semicircle, weapons slung but ready. Their body language screamed danger. Nora stepped off behind Harrison, her rifle low, eyes scanning. Roar watched her approach, disbelief flickering for a second before he buried it under a smirk. "King," he said evenly, "hell of a trick. You've got more lives than a cat." She stopped 10 feet from him. "You threw me out of a helicopter." He tilted his head. "Did I, or did your harness fail? These things happen in turbulence." Her grip on the rifle tightened, but she didn't raise it. She didn't need to. Her words were sharper than any bullet. "I've got your voice on tape, Roar. Every word, the deal, the payout, the order." For the first time, his jaw clenched. "You don't have proof." She glanced at Harrison, who held up the recorder. "We do." The air between them shifted, from accusation to inevitability. Even Roar felt it. He took a slow breath, eyes darting toward his men. Loyalty faltered in moments like this. You could see it in their posture, small hesitations, uncertain stances. One of them, Briggs, lowered his weapon half an inch. The guilt was written all over him. Roar noticed too. "Don't you move," he snapped. But the damage was done. Harrison spoke quietly. Master Sergeant Roar, you and your team are relieved of duty, pending formal charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and collusion with enemy assets. Roar laughed sharp, bitter. You think anyone going to believe this fairy tale? 5 decorated operators versus 1 ranger with PTSD. Please. Nora's eyes didn't leave his. You're right, they'll believe the evidence instead. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Roar lunged. Not toward her, toward Harrison. The motion was fast, desperate. Nora reacted first. One shot cracked, precise, controlled, the round slamming into the dirt inches from Roar's boots. Enough to stop him mid-step. Don't, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Because it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Roar froze, chest heaving. For the first time, he looked uncertain, the mask slipping. Behind him, Briggs finally dropped his rifle and raised his hands. Enough, he muttered, this went too far. That was the breaking point. Within seconds, 2 more soldiers followed suit, their eyes avoiding Roar's. The man who'd once commanded their fear now stood alone. Harrison signaled the MPs from the second chopper. They moved in fast, weapons drawn, securing the deltas one by one. When they reached Roar, he didn't resist, not really. He just glared at Nora, bloodied hand flexing against the zip tie. You think this changes anything, he spat. The system buries people like you. They'll chew you up and spit you out. Nora looked at him, not with hatred, not even with triumph. Just quiet clarity. I've been buried before, she said. Didn't take. He smirked, but there was no weight behind it now. As they dragged him toward the Black Hawk, Nora felt something strange, not victory, not relief. Something emptier. She'd dreamed of justice, of seeing his face when he realized she'd lived. But standing here now, with him in cuffs, all she felt was tired. Bone-deep, soul-deep tired. Harrison approached her. You saved us a court-martial nightmare, he said, voice low. She shook her head. No, sir, I saved my name. The army will handle the rest. He nodded, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. You realize what you did defies physics, right? Physics is just math, she said, and I've always been good at math. The faintest smile crossed his face. We'll debrief at base. Then you're getting medical, whether you like it or not. Understood, she said, though her gaze lingered on the mountains. They were silent witnesses, vast, indifferent, ancient. If they could speak, they'd tell the truth. She'd been broken here and rebuilt. The helicopters lifted again, carrying prisoners, proof, and ghosts. Nora sat by the open door, wind on her face, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of peaks. Kim sat across from her, helmet in his lap, studying her. You realize, he said quietly, they're going to make you a legend for this. She gave a small, humorless smile. Legends are just names carved on headstones. Not this time. She didn't answer. Her gaze drifted down to the valley below, the river gleaming like steel in the morning sun. Her crash site. Her rebirth. And in that silence, something unspoken settled between them. The understanding that survival isn't always victory. Sometimes it's just the refusal to die when the world says you should. Later, when the helicopters touched down at Chapman, the entire base was waiting. Medics, MPs, command. And whispers already spreading like wildfire. She lived. She actually lived. Nora stepped off the ramp slowly, legs unsteady but head high. Cameras turned, eyes followed. But she didn't look at any of them. She looked at the flag on the pole above the base, rippling hard in the cold wind, and felt something she hadn't since the fall. Not pride. Not peace. Just a quiet, steady conviction. They'd thrown her from a helicopter to erase her. Instead, she'd carved her name into gravity itself. And for the first time in her life, Staff Sergeant Nora King allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, The world hadn't seen the last of her. They said she should have died on impact. That even if the river saved her bones, the cold would have stopped her heart. Every doctor, every analyst, every line of physics agreed. But she hadn't asked permission from any of them. When Staff Sergeant Nora King woke up in the medical wing of Forward Operating Base Chapman, the world looked strange, sterile, bright, and unreal after the raw edges of the mountains. The hum of fluorescent lights replaced the howl of wind. The scent of antiseptic replaced pine and smoke. She felt like she'd fallen into another dimension, one where survival wasn't measured by breaths or bullets but by paperwork and protocol. A nurse checked her vitals for the third time that morning. "BP's holding steady," he said quietly. "That's impressive considering." Nora didn't respond. She didn't need admiration, she needed answers. Across the room, Kim sat slouched in a chair, his uniform wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He'd been there since the choppers touched down, refused to leave. When she stirred, he stood immediately. "You're awake." "Barely." Her voice came out rough, cracked around the edges. "How long?" 36 hours. You've got a dislocated shoulder, 2 broken ribs, and a knee that's officially pissed at you for the rest of your life. He tried to joke, but the words landed heavy. You also have an entire base trying to figure out how you're still breathing. She looked past him to the window, to the faint blue glow of early morning outside. The mountains were visible in the distance, indifferent as ever. "Because I refuse not to," she said softly. Kim ran a hand through his hair. "You know, most people don't outthink terminal velocity. Most people don't get thrown out of helicopters by their own team," she said flatly. That shut him up. Silence stretched. Only the heart monitor filled it slow, steady, alive. He sat down again. "They've got Rohr and his men in holding. MPs, CID, the whole alphabet soup. You made waves, Nora, big ones." "Good," she said. "I want them drowned in it." He studied her. "And what about you?" "What about me?" "You walked out of hell and dragged the devil with you. You think that doesn't leave a mark?" She met his eyes, steady, dark, tired. "I didn't survive for therapy, Danny. I survived to make it mean something." The next day, she was summoned to the debriefing room, the same one where this had all begun. Different faces this time. Less laughter, more gravity. At the head of the table sat Major Harrison, flanked by 2 CID investigators and a legal officer. Kim waited by the wall, silent observer again. "Staff Sergeant King," Harrison began, "we've reviewed your statement, your equipment logs, and the recorder you recovered from Rohr's camp. Before we proceed, I want to make one thing clear. What you survived defies explanation. But the evidence—" He tapped a folder on the table. "The evidence leaves no doubt." He pressed play on a laptop. The room filled with distorted audio, rotor noise, male voices, then Rohr's unmistakable tone. 50,000 each, plus future considerations. Nothing personal, King, you're just too effective. Then the sound of the knife cutting. The scuffle. The wind. The scream of air as the helicopter door yawned open. Kim turned away. Harrison didn't. He watched her instead. When the recording ended, silence swallowed the room. No one breathed for several seconds. Finally, Harrison said, "That's more than enough for prosecution." Nora sat still. "Good, then do it." The CID agent, a gray-haired man with cold eyes, leaned forward. "We intend to, but you should understand this will be complicated. Public attention, classified operations, command politics. They'll try to contain this story." "They can try," she said. Her tone wasn't defiant, just certain. Harrison closed the folder. "King, there's something else. The board wants a full psychological evaluation before you return to active status." Her jaw tightened. "You think I'm unstable?" "I think you fell 8,000 feet and lived," he he said evenly. "We need to know what that did to you." She almost laughed. "It made me angry, sir. Angry that good men died following bad ones." No one replied. The lawyer scribbled something on a pad. The air felt heavy again, the weight of paperwork trying to crush something that refused to fit inside a report. After the meeting, Harrison walked with her down the corridor. "You did the impossible, King, but impossible things tend to make people nervous." "Then let them be nervous." He looked at her, really looked. "You know, when you didn't come back that night, I wrote your condolence letter, sent it up the chain." "What'd you say?" "That you were one of the best we had, that you died doing your job." She nodded slowly. "Guess you'll need to edit that." "Yeah," he said quietly, "I guess I will." That night sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the fall, the rush of air, the cold bite of river water, the moment her bones decided not to shatter. Not nightmares exactly, just echoes. The body remembering what the mind tried to forget. She rose before dawn, slipping out into the cold. The base was quiet, the kind of stillness that only comes before first light. She walked past hangars, past parked vehicles to the edge of the airfield. The mountains were still there, jagged, watching, eternal. She stared at them a long time. She wasn't sure why she'd come out here, maybe to remind herself that it had really happened, that she'd truly fallen from that sky and somehow walked away. She crouched down, running her fingers through the gravel, grounding herself in something solid. Footsteps behind her broke the silence. "Couldn't sleep either," Kim's voice said softly. She didn't look up. Sleep overrated. He came to stand beside her. The wind cut through both of them. CID's pushing hard. Roar's team already flipped on him. Turns out they'd been running protection for Rashid's network for months. Smuggling, intel leaks, the works. You didn't just survive, Nora. You exposed half a corruption ring. "Lucky me," she muttered. Kim studied her profile, the exhaustion behind her eyes, the small tremor in her injured hand. "You're not done yet, are you?" She turned toward him, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said carefully, "you're already thinking about the next step, the next fight." She exhaled slowly, watching her breath turn to mist. "I don't know how to stop." "That's what I'm afraid of." There was no anger in his voice, only concern, the kind of concern that comes from watching someone walk a line too thin for the rest of the world to see. She looked back at the mountains. "Do you know what falling felt like?" she asked suddenly. He shook his head. It wasn't fear, not after the first second. It was clarity. Every sound, every thought, every heartbeat stripped away until all that was left was choice. You either surrender or calculate. And I calculated. She turned toward him, voice quieter now. "That's the part no one understands. Survival isn't instinct. It's math. It's will. It's deciding to keep fighting even when the ground's racing up to meet you." Kim didn't speak for a long time. Then, "And what happens when there's no more ground to fight?" She didn't answer. Days passed. Investigations, depositions. Roar and his men were flown out under guard, their faces hidden, their futures sealed behind courtroom doors. Word spread across the network, whispers in mess halls, rumors on encrypted channels. The woman who fell and lived. Some called it impossible. Others called it divine. Nora called it physics with a touch of rage. Her body healed slower than the bureaucracy did. Physical therapy hurt worse than the fall. She endured it silently, counting reps like she'd once counted shots fired. The medics said she pushed too hard. She said pain was just noise. Weeks turned into 2, then 3. When the call finally came, she was halfway through a set of pull-ups, her shoulders screaming in protest. "Staff Sergeant King, report to Major Harrison's office." She wiped sweat from her face, rolled her shoulder and went. Harrison was standing by the window when she entered, sunlight cutting sharp lines across his desk. He turned as she saluted. "At ease, King, sit down." She did. He studied her for a moment, then slid a folder across the desk. Rohr and his team pled guilty, court-martial complete, sentences pending. They'll spend the rest of their lives behind wire. Nora didn't smile. Justice served then. "Partially," Harrison said, "but that's not why you're here." He opened another folder. This one was thinner, marked with a single red classification stripe. "You've got two options: full medical retirement with honors, benefits, the whole package, or, she interrupted, or reassignment." Her eyes narrowed. "To where?" Harrison allowed himself a rare smile. "There's a unit being formed at Bragg. Special activities, mixed branches, deniable operations. They want people who know what it means to walk out of the impossible." She leaned back, considering. "You think I belong there?" "I think you've already been operating in that mindset for years." For a long moment, she said nothing. "Then Fort Bragg, Building 9. He nodded. "You'll report there in 2 weeks if you accept. It's your call." She looked down at her hands, calloused, scarred, steady. Once they'd been tools for precision. Now they were proof. "Sir," she said quietly, "I didn't come back from the dead to retire." "Then I'll see you at Bragg," he said, standing. "And King." "Sir." He met her gaze. "I've seen soldiers survive firefights. I've seen them survive IEDs. But what you did, that wasn't survival, that was defiance." She stood, pain rippling through her ribs as she straightened. "Rangers lead the way, sir." He nodded. "That they do." That night, as she packed her duffel in silence, Kim knocked on the doorframe. "So," he said, "medical retirement or mystery assignment?" She looked over her shoulder. "What do you think?" He smiled faintly. "I think they threw you out of a helicopter and you turned it into a promotion." She zipped the duffel. "The easy path's overrated." "Yeah," he said, "but the hard path has cliffs." She paused at that, then shrugged. "Guess I've got experience with falling." As she passed him, limping slightly, Kim said softly, "You sure you're ready for this?" She didn't turn back. "I wasn't ready for the fall either," she said. "Didn't matter then, won't matter now." Outside, the wind picked up, the same wind that had once tried to erase her from the world. Now it sounded almost like applause. Sometimes survival isn't a return. It's a reminder. A reminder that the ones who fall and rise again aren't broken, they're recalibrated. How do you return to a world that already wrote your obituary? You don't. You build a new one, piece by quiet piece, out of scar tissue and unfinished business. The bus from the airfield rumbled down Bragg's main road, its windows streaked with rain. Nora sat near the back, uniform crisp, posture straight. Outside, Fort Bragg passed like a slideshow, barracks, flags, soldiers running drills in the drizzle. She walked these grounds before, but it felt different now. Colder. Like returning to a memory that didn't fit anymore. Building 9 wasn't marked on any public map. Just a low, windowless structure near the far fence line. Plain enough to ignore, guarded enough to notice. The driver stopped at the gate. A military policeman stepped aboard, scanned her ID and nodded. "Welcome back, Sergeant King. You're cleared for entry." She slung her duffel over one shoulder, every movement a reminder of what still hadn't fully healed. Pain now was background noise, something she'd learned to live around. Inside, Building 9 didn't look like any facility she'd ever seen. No platoon insignias, no rank boards. Just corridors lined with frosted glass, security cameras, and silence that hummed like an electrical current. A woman in a gray suit met her in the lobby, not military, not entirely civilian either. "Staff Sergeant King," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Director Ames, "Welcome to Special Projects Division." Nora shook it. "Ma'am." "Come with me." They walked down a long corridor, boots echoing. Ames talked while moving, voice smooth, deliberate. "This unit doesn't officially exist. We pull operators from every branch, special forces, intelligence, logistics, PSYOPs. You were recommended personally by General Morrison." "Recommended for what?" "For missions that don't end up in after-action reports," Ames said. "Missions where surviving isn't the goal, it's the baseline." They reached a secure door. Ames pressed her palm to a scanner. The lock hissed open. Inside was a wide operations floor, dim lights, glowing screens, maps pinned with red markers. Men and women worked in silence. Some wore uniforms, some didn't. Nora recognized the kind of quiet, the professional, heavy quiet of people who'd seen too much and learned to carry it without sound. Ames stopped near a glass briefing room. "Your team's waiting." "My team?" Nora asked, eyebrows raised. Ames gave a small smile. "Everyone here has died at least once on paper. You'll fit right in." Inside the room, 3 people sat at the table. The first was a tall, dark-skinned man in Air Force fatigues, his left sleeve empty below the elbow. He nodded politely. "Captain Leon Price, pararescue, call me Leon." The second, a wiry woman with short blonde hair and a scar tracing her jawline, leaned back in her chair. "Lieutenant Vega, cyber warfare. I handle the ghosts in the machine." The third, broad-shouldered, middle-aged, marine posture, didn't offer a hand, just studied Nora. "Gunnery Sergeant Cole Avery," he said. "You're the ranger who fell out of the sky." Nora met his gaze evenly. "And you're the Marine who reads personnel files before saying hello." He cracked a grin. "Fair." Ames gestured toward the empty chair. "You're Team Kilo now. Officially, you don't exist. Unofficially, you'll be handling interdictions the regular branches can't touch." Nora sat. "Interdictions of what?" "Smuggling corridors," Vega said, tapping the map. "Weapons, drugs, intel leaks, sometimes people. Your name been coming up in chatter from Rashidi's old network. They think you're dead. We're going to use that." Ames folded her arms. "Your first mission's reconnaissance only. No contact unless confirmed. You'll move tomorrow at 600. Leon raised an eyebrow. "Fast turnaround, ma'am." "Time's a luxury," Ames replied. "And King's already proven she doesn't need parachutes." A flicker of humor passed around the table. Not laughter, but acknowledgement, a language soldiers used when they respected someone without saying it. After the briefing, Nora found her assigned bunkroom. Spartan bed, footlocker, small desk. Exactly the kind of simplicity she needed. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for a long moment. Her reflection in the small mirror looked both familiar and foreign. Same eyes, darker now. Same face, older somehow, not in years but in experience. She'd fallen once from the sky. Now she was falling into something else, a life where the lines between justice and survival blurred until neither had edges. A soft knock broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said. It was Leon, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you might need this. Mess hall sludge, but it's hot." She took it, nodded. "Thanks." He leaned against the doorframe. "You know, people talk about you." "Let me guess, legend, miracle, ghost." He chuckled. "Mostly the last one. I've heard operators whisper your name like it's an urban myth. The ranger who beat gravity. They don't know whether to fear you or salute you." She sipped the coffee. "They should do neither." He watched her a moment, then said quietly, "You really don't believe in luck, do you?" "Luck for the unprepared." Leon smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what makes you dangerous." He left her with that thought. The next morning came gray and heavy with rain. The kind of weather that soaked through gear and mood alike. Team Kilo assembled by the helipad at dawn, 4 figures beneath the wash of rotor light. No fanfare, no send-off. Nora checked her weapon, motion fluid despite the ache in her shoulder. Vega strapped into her seat, tablets glowing. Leon gave a thumbs up to the pilot. Avery sat across from Nora, helmet in his lap, studying her again. "You always this calm before insertion?" he asked. "I get nervous after," she said. He grinned. "You might fit here after all." The helicopter lifted, cutting through clouds low enough to touch. Below, the Carolina pines turned to patchwork farmland, then mist. Inside, the noise was deafening. Conversation wasn't needed. Each of them had been in too many birds like this. Each carried ghosts that spoke louder than comms ever could. Halfway to target zone, Vega's voice broke through the static. "Satellite confirms movement on the old Rashidi Trail. Small convoy, 4 trucks, 1 armored. Looks like they're running cargo south through the hills." Leon leaned toward her screen. "Could be a test run." "Or bait," Nora murmured. Avery looked up. "You expecting company, Sergeant?" "I stopped expecting anything. That's why I'm still alive." The team exchanged a glance. No one argued. The Black Hawk descended low over the valley, different country, same feeling. Nora's pulse slowed, body adjusting to the familiar rhythm of insertion. Count the seconds, breathe through the noise, let instinct take over. Rain streaked the windows. Somewhere below, roads coiled like veins through dark forest. When they touched down on a ridgeline, Nora was the first out. Boots hit mud, rifle up, scan. Everything about the moment felt like an echo, except this time she wasn't falling. She was hunting again. Hours later, they lay concealed above a dirt road, eyes on the convoy below. 4 trucks, headlights dimmed, men with rifles riding the beds. Vega whispered over comms, "Thermal shows crates, could be narcotics, could be small arms. Hard to tell." Leon adjusted his scope. 2 organized for random smugglers. Avery frowned. "They're waiting for something." Nora's focus narrowed. Through her scope, she spotted the lead driver step out to smoke. His jacket bore an old emblem. A familiar one. The same insignia Rashidi's men had worn in Afghanistan. Her breath hitched. This isn't random. They're exfiltrating intel from the same network. Roar's contact chain wasn't just money, it was movement. "You saying this is connected to your case?" Vega asked. "I'm saying it never ended." Before anyone could respond, static crackled through their comms, interference from below. Then a voice, faint but clear enough to recognize. "Ames. Team Kilo, maintain overwatch only. No engagement." Avery looked confused. "We can stop them right now." "Orders are orders," Vega reminded him. But Nora's gut twisted. The same cold unease she'd felt that night over the Hindu Kush. She whispered, "Something off." Leon met her eyes. "You want to disobey a direct order." "I want to live long enough to figure out who's giving them." Below, the convoy began moving again, slowly, carefully, as if waiting for confirmation. Rain masked their engines, their tracks blending into mud. Nora watched them disappear into the tree line, every instinct screaming that this wasn't over. It wasn't an op. It was a message. Someone out there still remembered her and was still cleaning up the mess she'd survived. Back at Building 9, hours later, Nora stood in the debriefing room. Ames listened in silence as she laid out the details. The convoy, the markings, the signal interference. When Nora finished, Ames folded her hands. "You disobeyed a hold order." "I observed within operational range," Nora countered. "You were supposed to watch, not move." "If I hadn't, we'd have missed the Rashidi connection." Ames's gaze was sharp, unreadable. "You think this unit plays by rules, Sergeant King. We play by layers. Need to know. You've been here 48 hours. Don't assume you understand the map." Nora didn't blink. "Ma'am, I don't need a map, I just follow the truth." Be careful with that word, Ames said. It has a short lifespan around here. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ames dismissed her. Get some rest, you'll need it. As Nora walked out, she could feel eyes on her, unseen, silent, watching from behind those frosted glass walls. This wasn't just another assignment. It was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of classified. And for the first time since that night in the helicopter, Nora felt it again, the cold pulse of danger threading through her veins. But this time, it wasn't gravity she was fighting. It was the system itself. Later, alone in her quarters, she unrolled her gear mat and cleaned her rifle, a ritual of clarity. The motion soothed her, sharpened her thoughts. Rain tapped against the roof. Her reflection glinted faintly off the weapon's steel, calm, steady, dangerous. She whispered to the empty room. They threw me out of the sky to bury the truth. Now I'm back on the ground to dig it up. How do you fight an enemy you can't see? You start by watching who flinches when you ask the wrong question. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Building 9 hummed with the sound of servers and secrets, a mechanical heartbeat beneath the concrete. Nora moved through it like a shadow, her badge granting her access but not belonging. Every corridor smelled of recycled air and unspoken rules. Officially, she was prepping for follow-up analysis on the convoy they'd spotted. Unofficially, she was tracing the interference that had cut their comms during the mission, the glitch that had come from inside their own encrypted net. She found it in the logs at 2:17 hours. A subroutine injected into their channel from an internal relay, not from the field, not from a satellite. From right there, inside Building 9. Someone had jammed their frequency on purpose. She saved the data to a drive the size of a thumbnail and slipped it into her sleeve cuff. Her heart didn't race, it never did anymore. Fear was a luxury for people who hadn't already fallen out of the sky. At 900, Ames called for a briefing. Same glass room, same tight smiles. Team Kilo, Ames began. The Rashidi corridor intel has been transferred to Strategic Command. Your next op is domestic training, facility test in the Appalachians. Nora felt Leon shift beside her. He didn't like the tone either, the way training rolled off Ames's tongue like camouflage. Nora asked, "We're not pursuing the convoy lead." Ames's expression didn't change. "That mission is now above our clearance. You'll focus on readiness." Nora studied her face, calm, practiced, professional. But the eyes betrayed the smallest flicker when she said clearance. Fear maybe, or control. In either case, it told Nora what she needed to know. The truth was bigger than Building 9. After the meeting, Vega caught up with her in the corridor. "You're going to keep digging, aren't you?" "Wouldn't you?" Vega hesitated. "I looked into the network you flagged. Half the funding channels for this division trace back to shell companies in Dubai. Guess who handled logistics for Rashidi's smuggling routes before we shut them down?" "Don't say it." "Same names, same bank trails." Nora exhaled slowly. So the rot didn't stop, it moved. Vega's voice dropped. "Be careful, this place listens even when no one's here." That night, Nora went for a run. It was something she did when her thoughts got too loud. The rain had thinned to mist, the track slick under her boots. Every footfall echoed like a clock counting down. Halfway through the 3rd lap, she noticed the figure. A man standing by the fence, hands in pockets, motionless. Roar's height, Roar's build. She blinked hard and the figure turned away, vanishing into fog. Impossible. Roar was locked up, waiting for sentencing in Quantico. But the body remembers danger long before the mind believes it. She stopped running. Morning brought no peace. Leon found her in the armory, field stripping her rifle. "You're wound tight," he said. She didn't look up. Can't relax when ghosts are walking around the perimeter. He frowned. What ghosts? She told him what she'd seen, or thought she'd seen. Leon didn't dismiss it. Could be coincidence, could be warning. Either way, keep your weapon close. Later that day, Vega pinged her from the comms bay. I ran deeper on that data block you pulled. The signal originated from level 3. That's not ops, that's administration. Meaning? Meaning someone with clearance higher than ours wanted us blind. Nora's jaw tightened. Send me the access list. I can't, it's firewalled, and if I push harder, Ames will know. Then print it, Nora said, old school. When the printout slid under her door an hour later, it was a single page of names and ID numbers. One line circled in red. Director Ames. Nora stared at it for a long time, then folded it twice and slipped it into her boot. At 1800, Building 9 went into lockdown for network maintenance. Everyone was confined to quarters. No outgoing transmissions, no internal mail. Nora waited 10 minutes, then left her room anyway. The corridors were empty, lights dimmed. She moved silent, following the low vibration that always came from the main server room. When she reached it, the door was open. Inside, Ames stood alone before a bank of monitors, the glow painting her in cold light. She was on a private line, voice low but urgent. Yes, the file's secure. No, she doesn't suspect yet. Because she thinks I'm on her side. That's how this works. Nora froze. Each word hit like another cut in the harness. Ames turned, maybe she'd felt the air shift, and saw Nora in the doorway. Sergeant King, she said smoothly, ending the call. Couldn't sleep. Who were you talking to? Ames smiled faintly. Above your clearance. Nora took a step closer. That clearance almost got my team killed. And yet here you are, Ames said, unbothered. You of all people should appreciate survival by adaptation. You think Building 9 exists to end corruption. No, we channel it. We use their networks to control their wars. You burn weeds, they grow back. We trim them instead. That's what you call it, trimming. Nora's voice was low, dangerous. You're laundering blood through bureaucracy. Ames's expression never wavered. And you're benefiting from it. You're alive because I let you stay that way. Something inside Nora snapped, quiet but final. Wrong, she said. I'm alive because you underestimated gravity. Before Ames could respond, Nora reached forward, yanked the drive from the console and stepped back. Alarms blared instantly, motion sensors triggered. Ames didn't move to stop her, she only smiled. You can't fight the system, King. The system owns the fall. Nora turned and disappeared into the corridor before the guards arrived. She spent the night off-grid, hidden in the old supply tunnels that predated Building 9. There she watched the data she'd stolen flicker across her tablet screen, encrypted files, transfer logs, coded communications. Names she recognized. Contracts signed by people she trusted. It wasn't one rotten mission. It was a network that had never died. And she was now the only witness alive to prove it. When dawn came, she rose, wrapped her shoulder and whispered to herself. They tried to bury me once. Let's see if they learned anything. Part 7. Voiceover narrative cinematic tone approximately 560 words. What do you do when the truth becomes classified? You carry it anyway, even if it kills you twice. Nora didn't sleep. By sunrise, she had the entire data package copied onto 3 drives, one for evidence, one for insurance, one for Kim. Because she trusted only one man to make sure the story didn't vanish again. At 700, she slipped out through the perimeter maintenance gate, wearing civilian coveralls and a borrowed ID from Vega. Rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray, the color of decisions that couldn't be undone. Her destination, the old training airfield 20 miles west. Kim was there, temporarily assigned to airborne school as an instructor. If she could reach him before Ames, people caught on, they might still have leverage. Halfway down the highway, a government SUV appeared in her mirror. Unmarked, tinted, keeping distance. She knew the rhythm, surveillance tail professional. Ames wasn't wasting time. Nora accelerated, then turned off onto a dirt access road. The SUV followed. So be it. The chase was brief. Mud-sprayed tires skidded. When the path narrowed between trees, she braked hard, swung the door open, and vanished into the forest. By the time the agents reached the spot, she was gone, a ghost again, swallowed by pine and silence. It took her 6 hours on foot to reach the outskirts of the airfield. Her knee screamed with every incline. She ignored it, moving through the tree line until she saw the hangar roofs glinting in the weak afternoon sun. Kim was on the tarmac, clipboard in hand, shouting instructions to recruits. When he saw her emerge from the woods, muddy, armed, eyes burning with urgency, his expression froze. "Jesus, Nora," he said when she reached him, "what did you do now?" She handed him the drive. "Proof, Ames is dirty, Building 9's compromised." He glanced around. "You can't be here, They already are," she cut in. "I need this uploaded to someone outside their chain. Morrison, CID, anyone clean." He looked at the drive, then back at her. "You're asking me to commit treason on faith. I'm asking you to finish what you started when you believed I was worth saving." That silenced him. Finally he nodded. "Come inside." They slipped into the maintenance hangar. Kim locked the door and moved to an old terminal. Nora paced, restless, scanning through the window slats. Every shadow looked like headlights. "Transmission ready in 3 minutes," Kim said. "After that, even Ames won't be able to pull it back." "Make it 2, Nora replied. He grinned, still giving orders. But before he could hit send, the hangar lights cut out. Power gone. Generator offline. Nora froze. "They're here." From outside came the distant crunch of tires on gravel. Then voices, radios, boots. Kim grabbed his sidearm. "Back door." "Locked," she said. "We hold." He nodded once, "Then we make it loud." The first flashbang rolled under the door. Light and thunder. Nora dove behind the tool bench, ears ringing. Kim fired twice, suppressive. A return volley of silenced rounds tore through the metal wall. Nora crawled to the control box, rerouted power manually, sparks jumping as she twisted wires barehanded. The console flickered back to life. Kim shouted, "Now." She slammed the upload key. The progress bar crawled across the screen, 1%, 10%, 30%. Gunfire rattled again. Kim fell back behind a crate, bleeding from his arm but still shooting. "Keep it going." Nora's shoulder burned. Her lungs felt like broken glass. But she stayed at the console, watching the numbers climb. 50%, 70%, 92%. Then the door burst inward. Ames stepped through, flanked by 2 operators in black. No hesitation. Just cold precision. "Stop the upload, King." Nora turned, rifle raised. "You first." Ames sighed, almost pitying. "You don't understand the scale. This program keeps nations from burning. You leak that data, and you ignite half the world." Nora's voice shook with restrained fury. "Then maybe it deserves to burn." They stared at each other, predator and survivor, belief against belief. Behind Nora, the console beeped. "Upload complete." Ames saw it too. For the first time, her calm cracked. "What did you do?" "Set gravity in motion," Nora said. Gunfire erupted. Kim's shot took 1 guard down. Nora moved instinctively, diving behind a pillar as bullets shredded the console. Sparks rained like fireworks, the hangar filled with smoke and chaos. By the time the second guard advanced, Nora was already there, close, fast, ruthless. She disarmed him with a strike, turned his own weapon, and dropped him with 2 rounds. Aims back toward the door, pistol trembling. "This doesn't end the way you think." Nora stepped forward, blood on her sleeve, eyes like iron. "It never does." She pulled the fire alarm, a deafening wail filling the space, then grabbed Kim, dragging him toward the side exit as emergency lights bathed everything in red. Outside, the sky cracked open with thunder. Rain again, heavy, endless cleansing. They ran through it, lungs burning until they reached the tree line. Behind them, sirens wailed, flames licking the hangar roof. Whatever remained inside Building 9's files would drown in smoke and secrecy. But the truth was already gone, carried by signal to servers far beyond Ames's reach. They collapsed under the trees. Kim pressed a hand to his bleeding arm, breathing hard. "You realize," he panted, "you just declared war on your own command." Nora stared at the horizon, where lightning split the sky. "No," she said, "I declared war on gravity again." He laughed weakly. "Still think you're going to win?" She turned to him, expression calm, resolute. "I already did. I'm still falling, just in the right direction this time." They sat in silence as the rain drowned the sound of distant sirens. Above them, thunder rolled, the same sound that had once meant doom now echoing like applause. Hours later, long after Ames's team had swept the area, Building 9 went dark for good. Official explanation: electrical failure, data loss. Unofficially, a ghost wiped its servers clean and vanished into the storm. And somewhere beyond Fort Bragg, on a secure CID network, a new file appeared anonymously. Subject: Building 9. Attached: audio documents, video evidence. Sender: unknown. Origin: untraceable. But the signature line carried 2 words only. Rangers lead. What happens to the soldier who survives every war, except the one inside her? 3 months. That's how long it took for her name to vanish again. Official records listed Nora King as relieved of duty under medical review. Unofficially, she didn't exist. Building 9 had burned itself out of history, and with it, every trace of her service after that fall. The Army buried the scandal under phrases like containment, security oversight, and internal audit. Ames disappeared, reassigned, rumored dead, or worse, promoted. Kim survived his wounds, quietly transferred to a non-combat division. They told him not to contact her. He did anyway. Her last message to him was short, typed from a prepaid phone in a nameless town. "You can stop looking, I'm fine, don't salute ghosts, N." After that, silence. She went aground, no insignia, no uniform, no call sign. Just a woman with scars she didn't explain, and a habit of checking exits wherever she went. Somewhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a small cabin stood at the edge of a forgotten trail. It had no electricity, no address. But it had a view, endless forest rolling like a green sea, and the sound of wind through pine that sometimes felt like forgiveness. That's where she stayed. That's where the world stopped chasing her, and she stopped running from it. Most days she woke before sunrise, made coffee on a small gas burner, listened to birds instead of helicopters. And when the wind shifted just right, she could almost believe she'd earned peace. Almost. There were nights, though nights when thunder rolled across the mountains and her body remembered the fall. The weightless second before impact. The breath she hadn't finished taking. The impossible choice between panic and precision. And every time she reminded herself, I chose precision. Because that was the truth. She hadn't survived by luck or grace or divine intervention. She survived because she refused not to. The locals knew her only as Nora, the quiet woman who fixed radios and hiked alone. Kids brought her broken drones and bikes, calling her Miss K. She smiled rarely, but when she did, it was real. Something about those kids, untouched by orders or ranks, reminded her of the version of herself she never got to be. Sometimes she'd sit by the river at dusk, tracing the scars on her hands. The water ran cold, steady, unjudging. It didn't care who'd fallen or who'd risen, it just kept moving. And maybe that's why she stayed near it. Because for the first time, she didn't need to prove she could survive it. Only that she could live beside it. One evening, she heard tires on the gravel road, a sound she hadn't heard in months. Her instinct reacted before thought did. She had her sidearm drawn before the vehicle even stopped. Then she saw the man step out. Kim. He raised both hands, smiling faintly. That's a hell of a welcome. She lowered the weapon, slow but cautious. You found me. Didn't have to. You left a trail, coffee orders, tool parts, fake names. I just followed the gravity. She almost laughed, almost. You shouldn't be here. I had to make sure, he said. The file went public. The networks are clean now. Building 9's gone. Gone, she echoed. That's one word for it. He looked around, taking in the quiet. So this is where ghosts retire. Not ghosts, she said. Just people who learn to stop falling. He sat on the porch beside her. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Kim said softly, You know, when I first met you, I thought you were reckless. I was. And now. She looked out over the trees. Now I'm careful where I crash. That made him smile. He reached into his jacket and handed her something small, a patch. Old, worn, embroidered with the Ranger tab. They asked me to give you this. You're still technically on the roll. Morrison pulled strings. She turned it over in her hands, thumb tracing the edges. So I'm back on the books. Only if you want to be. The forest wind filled the silence between them. Finally, she set the patch on the porch railing and said, No, I think I'll stay off the page a while. Some stories work better that way. Kim nodded. They'll tell it anyway, you know, what you did, how you fell, how you... Don't, she interrupted gently. Let them tell whatever version they need. The truth's heavier than that. He studied her face, seeing something new in it, peace maybe, or something close. Before he left, he paused by his truck. You ever come back? She looked toward the horizon, where the last light caught the mountains like gold armor. I already did. He smiled, started the engine, and was gone. For a while, the cabin went quiet again. Seasons shifted, leaves fell, snow returned. And Nora stayed, not hiding anymore but existing. Every morning she hiked the ridge, marking new trails on an old map. Every night she wrote fragments in a weathered notebook, half diary, half confession. Some wars never end. Some just get quieter. And sometimes silence isn't peace. It's just the sound of breath after survival. She didn't send the notes to anyone. Didn't sign them. Maybe she knew one day someone would find them, and maybe that was enough. Then one afternoon, the post came, an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single photograph. 4 faces, half smiling, taken at Building 9 before everything went dark. Vega, Leon, Avery, herself. On the back, 3 words written in Vega's sharp handwriting. Still leading always. Nora held it for a long time, eyes soft, mouth curving into the smallest smile. She pinned it to the cabin wall beside a map of the world. Then she whispered the words that had carried her through everything. Rangers lead the way. And for the first time in a long time, her voice didn't shake. Months later, the storm returned. Lightning split the sky, wind tearing through the trees. Nora stood on the porch, unafraid, rain soaking through her clothes. She watched the river surge below, wild and unstoppable. It looked like the same river that had once caught her, years ago, halfway between life and death. Only now, she didn't see it as the thing that saved her. She saw it for what it was, the thing that taught her to stop fighting gravity. Because maybe survival was never about beating the fall. Maybe it was about learning how to land without losing yourself. She stepped off the porch and walked straight into the storm. No hesitation, no fear. Just quiet understanding that falling and flying share the same silence. Somewhere far away, in a Pentagon sub-basement, a junior analyst found an unclassified file with no author. It contained data on black operations, coded transmissions, and a list of names marked recovered integrity. At the bottom of the file, a single line. For those who fell and rose again. You can throw us from the sky, but you can't teach us how to stop rising. And beneath it, unsigned but unmistakable, a small digital emblem in faded green. Rangers lead. Narrator's voice softens, final reflection. They threw her from the helicopter thinking she'd vanish into the mountains. But some souls don't fall, they orbit. They turn descent into direction, pain into purpose, silence into strength. Because gravity can take you down. But dignity never hits the ground. And then softly, like an echo fading into the rain. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.